Whilst health and safety isn't a technical skill as such on its own, without an understanding of how health and safety is at play on a shoot, in an office or on a workplace, then we cannot achieve what we intend or want from our production and as a sum of the other technical areas. On any shoot, risk assessments must be made to ensure there is no immediate safety risks to anyone involved in the project. However, the risk assessment also looks at potential issues and ways of dealing with these so that any accidents that may happen are thought through in advance, with plans in place should a problem occur, allowing there to be less problems in the future and to minimise damage and health issues. The risk assessment is a document which is written and filled out when dealing with locations and equipment, and looks at laying out rules and regulations for the shoot and the level of the risks involved. By completing a risk assessment, you are able to prepare a set in a safe manner and ensure the health and safety of all involved in the production. It also covers a production team legally should something go wrong. There are also the small things which should be considered, which involve common sense and general health. For instance, making sure that all cables are stuck down on the floor so that you avoid tripping. Making sure that when moving equipment, you don't take more than you can carry so that you don't cause yourself injury or possibly drop the equipment, causing injury to, again, yourself or somebody else. Small risks in using equipment must also be considered. For instance, when using a simple piece of equipment such as a tripod, you must be careful not to trap fingers in the mechanism. These issues would be classed as low risk, but must be considered as they cause potential injury and health risk, however small. In the larger scale and more high-risk activities, e.g. electrical lighting, car chases, etc., more thorough health and safety checks must be carried out. After the initial risk assessment, which would be conducted before reaching the site, a health and safety check of the site must be carried out to ensure that the more high-risk activities and dangers are fully considered and precautions are suitably put in place should the worst happen. An example of this would be the Richard Hammond car crash, where the worst did happen, but due to the health and safety precautions in place, for example, an ambulance and fire engine on site, Hammond was wearing full protective kit. He had also been trained on the car for 3 weeks. All of these factors and others ensured that whilst he was seriously injured, he did not result in fatality, and instead was a terrible accident that thankfully the site was prepared for. If health and safety is not at play in large-scale, high-risk scenarios such as that one, then filmmaking becomes extremely dangerous and can cause major injury or worse, fatality, and so must be taken seriously to ensure the safety of those involved in the production. Health and safety is not suggesting there will be no risk, instead it's attempting to minimise the damage that those risks can cause. In a camera, the way an image is created is by recording the red, green and blue light into the chip. In a charged couple device or a CCD, it does this by splitting the light as it comes through the lens, depending on its wavelength, to its correct sensor. This then converts the light waves into electrons, also known as the digital signal, which replicates the frame being shot as a digital image. A complementary metal oxide semiconductor, or a CMOS, works similarly, however, it combines the image sensor and image processor. A disadvantage of this is that it creates a lower resolution image to the CCD, but a lot of HD cameras are now using the CMOS as it is a cheaper option and the technology is beginning to improve to an almost par with the CCD. HD formats describes the number of pixels in an image and as such the quality and size of the image. This works in a ratio format with dimensions increasing with number of pixels in a direct correlation. The three formats are 720p, which is a size of 1280 by 720 pixels, 1080p and 1080i, which is a size of 1920 by 1080 pixels, and then 24, 25, 50 and 60 Hz. The different sizes relate to the resolution of the image. The more pixels, the better the resolution, and whether they are progressive or interlaced. Progressive and interlaced refers to the scan process of the pixels, and is how the image is captured, transported and shown. Progressive is used in computer monitors and digital television screens and shows the pixels in horizontal lines. Interlaced is the standard television format and is where the phosphor persistence of the TV tube blends the fields together over a fraction of a second to make it appear as a single image. Progressive scanning requires a higher bandwidth but results in a much better image. Interlaced scanning requires a lower bandwidth, but to be shown on a progressive display has to be deinterlaced. The most important thing with the camera is understanding not only the technicalities of how it records and the output of the images it's recording, but also the functions of the camera in its manual settings, so that you can create an image and film which has the look and feel that you as a filmmaker want it to have. When needing to lighten an image, you can use gain, which electronically increases the signal artificially. It is measured in decibels, and on average camera it has a range of no decibels to 12, occasionally more. For most images, you don't want to have a gain of more than 6, as the more gain the noisier the image and more grainy the quality. However, if looking for a realist look or a documentary style, then a higher gain may be used to create this, but there can then be issues of transferring the film to the big screen or for broadcast. Another element to think about is the shutter speed. For normal operations, the shutter would be set at 1/60th of a second. The lighting calculations for PAL are made against a shutter speed of 1/60th. The higher the shutter speed, the sharper the image appears, as it reduces motion blur. However, the image can appear jerky, as motion blur helps with the frame-to-frame relationship. In addition to this, the frame rates are also important, as this controls the speed of capture. The standard is 24 frames per second for film, but this can be changed for slow or fast motion. However, this introduces issues with lighting and shutter speed. There is a view to changing the standard frame rate depending on the standard image because of HD, as often in sport when in HD it is full of shutter and so decreases the quality of viewing. When looking at sound in film, normally you are looking to make it as realistic as possible and as such need to ensure that the microphone's levels and quality of sound replicates that of everyday life and as such almost goes unnoticed on a film. The microphone was invented to act similarly to the ear. In the ear there is a small membrane which is the receptor for sound waves. In the microphone this is in the form of a circular diaphragm which vibrates and moves in sympathy with the sound that hits it. However, this is normally hidden beneath a protective wire mesh and wind cover to help make the sound recorded a better quality, especially if recorded outside, as the wind can often distort the sound or create cracking and popping sounds on the recording, as the wind distorts the vibrations that you want to capture on the microphone. When looking at microphones, impedance also needs to be taken into account. Impedance is measured in ohms and is a measure of the resistance to the flow of an alternating current in a circuit. This basically means that it measures how much resistance there is in one or other electrical equipment to the voltage going in. There are two types of impedance, input and output. The output is the resistance gauge on the equipment, which is producing the audio signal, i.e. the microphone. The input is the resistance at the device the microphone is connected to. It is important to remember that the input impedance should always be higher than the output impedance, and also in a situation with a long cable run, a low impedance device will be needed. When recording on a shoot, it is important to have a mixer which will allow the sound to pass from a microphone through the mixer and into the camera. By doing this, you allow quality control of the sound, as well as being able to partially edit the sound you need and want before post, which can be of benefit when on large-scale productions or live shoots. The most important thing to think about in terms of setting up for a film is that the camera and the machine need to be lined up. By this it means that the frequency that the machine records at is the same as the camera which you will film with. By doing this you ensure that in the edit there is no mismatch of sound. You do this by setting the tone, a high-pitched note which shows frequency, and then using this adjust the camera accordingly. On the mixer there are 4 pots, which stands for potentiometers. They work in the same way as a fader switch would on a mixer desk in a studio. They can be open or closed depending what sound you want to record. You don't say a microphone is on or off, you say it's open or closed, as you want to leave the microphones on constantly so that if anything is ever recorded, you can always open the microphone and know that you will be able to capture that recording or sound. Each pot is connected to an input, and so you are able to connect a microphone or synthesizer to each channel effectively. The controls of each channel are the same, and once you have learned how to work one, then you will be able to work all the channels on the mixer. Another way that the mixer quality controls the sound is through the use of the PPM monitors. These are 2 screens on the mixer which show a small dial which goes backwards and forwards, depending on the levels of the sound. And as long as they move in sync with each other, you can be assured that the same levels are going through the cables to the camera. All of these precautions are to ensure that the sound produced at the end of your shoot is to a high quality and means that you are able to trust what you have done and produced a great quality sound in the final edit. Lighting is a key part to any film and has to be balanced well depending on the effect you're hoping to create. A film can look very amateurish as soon as it is overexposed, and by lighting a film well, this should not happen. It is important to make sure that the lights are placed correctly depending on skin tones and lighting that already exists in the location. If you're set up in a studio, then all the lights will be set up by the production team and mean that you have control over the image that is created. When shooting outside, then consideration of natural light needs to be thought about, and often it is best to use the natural light to your advantage, reflecting it as a source. One of the best ways to film a person is in the three-point lighting technique, which uses a key light, a fill light and a backlight to help create even coverage of lighting on the person's face, whilst ensuring that they are also exposed correctly. The key light and fill light are placed at a 15 to 45 degree angle from the camera. If the model or actor has darker skin, then you'll want to use a softer light. This can be created with the use of diffusion. You can peg diffusion onto the barn doors of the light. It is advised to always use diffusion on the fill light. If all the lights are the same power, you then need to set up a backlight, which is set higher than the others and is used to distinguish the background from the back of the person's head, creating a slight outline around them. By using this effect, you can get better definition of the person whilst also ensuring there are no harsh shadows or overexposure. Lighting also plays a key part in creating the colours of the film. Whilst this can be achieved in post, it is good to try and create it on the shoot, as it allows more control of the image. One way to create colour is through the manipulation of the white balance tool. You can place a colour of opposite polarity in front of the camera to create either a colder or warmer image. For instance, if you were to place a blue gel over your white card used for the white balance, then you could create the illusion that you are in a warmer climate, as the camera would be tricked. Coloured gels can also be placed in front of the lights to help create different effects. For instance, if you are indoors but wish to make it appear as if you are outside, you can place a quarter blue on the light itself, which will make it appear like outdoor lighting, depending on the type of day. These effects are all helpful when it comes to creating the right atmosphere and mood for your film. Another way to help lighting outdoors is with the use of scrims, which similarly to diffusion can decrease the intensity or power of the light. However, scrims are useful as they are put in the back of the light instead of attached onto the front. So if you are using gels as well as needing diffusion, it can be better to use a scrim as it negates the need to be playing about at the front of the camera and so reduces time and difficulty. Histograms are used on the camera to show the exposure in lights and darks which are being produced by the lighting in the shot. They are useful as they give a visual understanding of the lights in a mathematical graph. By looking at a histogram, you can become aware of the problems in the lighting where the naked eye may not be able to tell. A histogram shows the distribution of light and dark over an image. It starts from dark on the left and moves to light on the right, with the percentage going up the y-axis. The histogram works by recording the tones as a bell-shaped curve, but where the information is missing, it creates a slope or spike in the graph, depending on either the darks or lights. If there is a spike in the lights, then you can assume that part of the image is overexposed. This does depend on the image itself, however, so the histogram should always be used with discretion, as there is no wrong or right, and depending on the camera screen, the graph can be more accurate. But the histogram is good as it allows you to see where the tones are balanced within the image. One of the most important parts of the histogram is the percentages. It is important to be aware of the percentages, as it tends to be the case that if an image goes above the 80% in an area, then it will be either over or underexposed, depending whether the spike is in the white or black. Whilst a histogram is a great tool and can help you to trust the images you're creating without having to be reliant on your own eye, you should always be cautious when using them, as the different types of cameras will show different types of histograms and can sometimes be more or less accurate depending on the way that they depict the graph. Because of this, sometimes blemishes or inaccuracies within the image won't show up on a histogram, or they'll show blemishes which do not exist or don't matter in the image you're trying to create. You should take it with perspective on the image you're trying to create and how you feel the image should turn out. And use the histogram as a guide when using it on set.